Welcome to the Holy and Whole podcast, a space where the innumerable paths to self-empowerment, embodiment and liberation converge. These dynamic conversational chambers are intended to inspire awakening, remembrance and the courage to live life with radical authenticity. I'm your host Natasha. You are most welcome here, so get comfy. It's time to dive into today's episode. Hello and welcome to the long-awaited second episode of the Holy and Whole podcast, which has actually been stalled and delayed due to a very, very unconscious block within me of perfectionism around this creation. And I actually feel that this is the perfect launch pad for today's conversation, which is all about New Earth creation and joy and allowing ourselves to surf the stream of New Earth consciousness. And it's almost as though I had to move through this process of recognizing this block in order for me to even be able to share what I wanted to share in today's episode, because I'd always intended that the second episode would be a little bit of a kind of grounding, establishing of the actual podcast itself with me as the host. And so if you are new here and you're new to my work or my frequency, welcome. My name is Natasha, and this conversational chamber will be just with me and my soul, and subsequent episodes will be with other guests. But today I always intended this to be me really kind of like framing where I'm coming from, really kind of allowing the vantage point from which I teach and live to be apparent to those that aren't so familiar with my work and are just coming across the podcast. But it's been fascinating to see how much unconscious resistance I had to continuing with the podcast after launching and releasing episode 1. And that actually allows me to segue really nicely into what I'd like to broadly kind of discuss first of all, and that is the current of creation, which I've been schooled in a lot of depth since my Kundalini awakening 6 years ago, but particularly this year, there seems to be this almost kind of consolidation and integration of all that I've been learning about creation, about the current of Shakti, the current of this kind of creative feminine principle that runs through all things and animates all of life, that has been denied and has been diminished and has been relegated and rendered irrelevant in a lot of spiritual, religious and cultural streams, but is coming back online now within us and within collective consciousness. And this year particularly, I feel has been almost a direct experience of how to live from creation consciousness, which is the consciousness of the new earth. And so let's start this exploration by really getting a sense of the current of creation. I really would invite you to, allow your faculties, your capacities, your multidimensional senses to really feel and tune into what I'm saying for this conversation, because this is a multidimensional conversation. When we're speaking of the new earth, we're speaking of a state of consciousness. We're speaking of, first and foremost, an inner state of consciousness that we cultivate and that we amplify through our devotion to truth, ultimate truth, embodied. So the new earth is, as I directly experience it, an embodied experience of my soul's innate joy, freedom, evolutionary and expansive nature, of the naturally creative nature of reality. And maybe we can make a little distinction here, because of course, at the absolute level, there is nothing, there is no one. At the absolute nature of consciousness, there is no distinction. There is just the singularity of consciousness. But I teach from the holy marriage, the union of opposites, of both masculine We could call this the kind of Advaita Vedanta I am non-dual stream, which is very, very kind of transcendental of the human experience. I teach from both an acknowledgement of that and also an acknowledgement of the subjective, of the embodied, of duality, of creation, of the feminine principle too. To me, we're only ever capturing half of the spiritual truth and half of the story if we only refer to one principle of God consciousness. That's my direct experience anyway. And so there is this sense that we're in a human body, and while the absolute nature of consciousness is beyond any manifested form or creation, we are also experiencing in this plane, in this reality, contrast, creation, different forms, different expressions of God. And we've actually come into these bodies to experience this, to interact with it, and to amplify it through our own creative endeavors here. And so I invite us for this conversation to imagine creation, which is always flowing, which is ever expansive because God, Goddess's presence has no limits. We are in this kind of constant state of creation, whether we're aware of it or not. We are part of a constant stream of creation, whether we're aware of it or not. This is sometimes referred to as manifestation, but what I'm speaking about today is really the sacred nature of creation, beyond just willful desires at an earthly level. This is the sacred nature of creation that underpins all things. So this is like a current that's flowing. This is the natural way of things. Okay, this is the natural way, this current flowing. And when this current of creation is flowing and we're conscious of it, and we are surfing this current, we are working in alignment, we're living in alignment with this current is flowing through us freely, it's flowing through reality freely. Our embodied experience as both human and spiritual beings is one of joy, it's one of freedom, it's one of expansion, it's one of evolution, it's one of creation. It's a highly dynamic, non-linear, non sequitur, joyous experience, blissful experience. And for me, this is the new earth. It's this consciousness. It's surfing this current. So this is our organic state and nature as beings. So why don't we experience life and reality in this way? Because when we become established in sort of crystallized states of fear within us or in reality, we obstruct the flow of this current. So if we're using the imagery of a stream or a current, any crystallized states of fear become like rocks or boulders, obscuring the natural free flow of this current. And so all of a sudden, this current, which is designed to flow, starts to come up against resistance. And this creates obscurities in the current's flow. The current has to try and take, deviant routes to try and continue flowing. It can often feel barred completely, and there can almost be like this dam building of creation energy that's not able to flow freely. I've got a cat present with me today, so on the bed. So if you can hear her, she says hi. And so the reason I'm bringing this up is because my experience, this kind of crippling, paralyzed state of perfectionism that I was feeling in relation to this podcast creation and filming this second episode, is the perfect example of a boulder obscuring the flow of creation that starts to obstruct this natural flow and actually then stagnates the flow. So when there are these obstructions, what we will find is that our reality will start to stagnate. And so if we actually really feel into this imagery of the stream, energy is always flowing to us and is designed to flow through us. And it's a continuum. It's a continuum of giving and receiving energy. And we become the conduit for that. But when we are not flowing in alignment with this current, when we're denying the current through resistance, through denial, through avoidance, through fear, we obstruct the flow, the natural flow of our being, and we also obscure and obstruct the field in its natural innate desire to be creative, to keep evolving, to keep pioneering, because creation is in and of itself an innately creative principle. It is an innately innovative principle. It is a dynamic principle. It is one that is constantly kind of on the cutting edge and always evolving that cutting edge. You know, it's always expanding. And so our lives start to feel stagnant, misaligned. We will start to notice incongruences when we're not honoring this flow. And what I've become very adept at, or I'm becoming more adept at, particularly this year, is starting to notice when I am experiencing, we could say, moments in my reality or in my life that feel sticky, that feel like, okay, there's a lack of like coherence here and harmony here, and realizing that that is a direct reflection of where I am in some state of withholding or resistance or incongruence within my being, because reality is just a reflection of our consciousness. And so there was really this sense with this podcast when I first felt into creating this, that it was very much coming from the soul. It was a creation that came through about 3 years ago under a different name at the time because I was vibrating differently. But it was this strong sense that, you know, I trained as a journalist. I've got a degree in journalism as well as English. And I really love communicating, particularly through the throat center. You know, I really love speaking. I really love expressing through words. I really love communication and exchanges between people. And I feel that that's one of my stronger skills and stronger kind of, you know, gifts. And I really felt that I'm in quite a unique position with the skill set I have to be able to amplify the voices of other creators, other leaders of the new earth, whose integrity and insights I really value and wish to amplify. And this felt very joyous to me when I really felt into this creation. And so really acting on this creation this year felt like me honoring the current of creation, which had actually been quite backlogged because there had been many things at a soul level that my soul had guided me to do that I wasn't acting on. And then, of course, naturally, the onward flow of energy in my life was stalling, and things were feeling really kind of incongruent because I wasn't releasing the energy that was trying to come to me and through me through these creative expressions, right? The podcast being one of them. And so this process is a relearning to flow with life, and actually to recognize that we belong to life, that we don't need to fight this current, that we don't need to fear this current, that actually when we flow with this current of creation and allow ourselves to vibrate in new earth consciousness, actually our experience of reality can become very seamless and very easeful and very joyous. And I've had a direct experience of this in the last few years, but particularly this year. That's not to say that my year hasn't been challenging. It's been actually probably one of the most painful, disruptive years of my life. It's been a complete cracking open, and I think this is the case for many of us because it's the year of the wood snake. It's a 9 year, it's a shedding year, it's a year of real collapse and release of very, very outdated structures and systems within us and on earth, so that this new earth consciousness can be reestablished. But what I have found in the moments when I've allowed myself to surrender into the flow of creation is that the process is actually quite seamless. It's actually quite effortless, that it's a very much a spontaneous unfolding, that life, when we're living from the current of creation, becomes a very spontaneous unfolding. Strategy collapses, the need to plan far ahead collapses, because everything is arising from the now moment, the truth of the now moment. What is the vibratory truth of the now moment? What does the innocence of the heart have to say in this now moment? This is what guides us. This is what directs us. It's not the mind. It's not linear time and space. It is marriage with the now. And in the now, we access what is available and what is possible. And so this marriage with the now and this openness to this flow of creation really sort of generates a field of potential. And that field of potential is abundant because it's God's field of potential. It is God, right? It is God consciousness. This is what we're accessing. It's this God Christed consciousness with the new earth. It is the abundant, benevolent, unconditionally loving, naturally creative, joyous nature of the divine, which we have been so far removed from on earth due to the crystallization of fear that I was speaking about earlier, that we have actually mistaken our true and normal capacities in nature to be ones of misery and suffering. And this is just simply an illusion. This is simply the crystallization of the fear that has been obscuring the truth. And so in order for us to actually access this current that I'm speaking about, we do need to honor that which has been obstructing the flow. We do need to directly address and feel the crystallized states of fear. Often within us, this kind of manifests as, frozen parts of us that were frozen through, traumatic states, traumatizing incidences, frozen emotion that we haven't had the capacity or the resource to feel. We haven't felt safe to feel. Any energy that has stagnated, frozen, or crystallized, because emotion is just energy in motion and it wants to flow. Anything that has crystallized within us needs to be thawed and released back into the current of creation. And this is how we free up space in our consciousness, space in our bodies, so that we can access this current of creation I'm speaking about, and ultimately the new earth consciousness. And the reason this is so multidimensional is because at a human bodily level, we could call it the animal body, the primal body, which is governed by the nervous system and these kind of like very kind of primal survival functions. We really directly experience these obstructions as very real, paralyzing states within us. And that is because, there's a biological component that we can't overlook on our spiritual journey. And I think this is something that I have a lot of, I see a lot of in the spiritual community, and I have a lot to say about, I suppose, because I can see that there's a lot of bypassing in traditional spiritual teachings around the body and around body consciousness and around somatic wisdom, when in fact, at least in this point in our evolutionary journey, the body is the portal. The body is the portal, not the mind, and not trying to escape or ascend out of the body, but actually allowing ourselves to descend fully into this body, to take non-dual states that we're accessing and to fully embody them. And that is how we activate creator consciousness. And so this body is a portal, and we're on earth in human form. We are the arms and the eyes and the legs of God. And so we're here to create. But this body, in its, we could say, slightly limited conditioning and software or hardware, the body consciousness does have a limited hardware, software. It runs on survival programming. And that's not bad. It just is what it is. And so we are trying to sort of allow creation to flow through vessels that have been biologically conditioned to really operate from, fight or flight or rest and digest, but are not at this point in our evolutionary process particularly well suited to these expansive, high vibratory states that are now starting to be anchored through our higher consciousness. So really, we must get the body on board. We really must work very consciously with the body if we are to be able to embody New Earth consciousness. We need to be able to feel what this body has been holding, what conditioning has obscured the flow of creation within us, what fears, what grief, what sadness, what anger, what rage, what undischarged energy in the form of kind of survival stress has been creating contraction in the system. That contraction is like those boulders in the water that obscure the truth. So it's really imperative that we are very, very compassionate and work very consciously with the body for this evolutionary process, not bypassing the body, not negating it. The body is not sinful, it's not bad, it's not wrong. It's just the body consciousness itself is limited compared to our spiritual nature and essence. And so we've got to learn how to work with the body's biological language, and also recognize that that is not the highest truth, right? So the body, particularly when the nervous system is dysregulated, is really operating in binaries of, either I'm safe or I'm not safe, and it's kind of like just these sort of very, very, these states of duality, and so we are seeking to soothe the body, we're seeking to harmonize the body, and the way we can do this is, well, there are innumerable ways we can do this, but it really comes down to bringing that higher awareness into the body, meeting what's here with compassion, allowing the crystallized states of fear and emotion to thaw back into the current of creation, so that current can flow through us freely again. And so I'll just mention here a few things that have been really helpful for me, because this is, for those that aren't aware of my journey, I was suicidal, very heavily depressed, dealing with complex PTSD that I had no awareness of for a long time, panic attacks daily at one point on my journey for 10 years. And so I'm very familiar with working with the body when it's dysregulated, when it's not in a state of harmony, when it's not open and receptive, when it's in a state of contraction and fear. And the things that have really helped me on this journey and through this process is working actually at a very embodied level. So whether that's through movement, whether that is actually just allowing myself to feel and express my emotions completely in an uninhibited way, allowing myself to flow with my rage and my anger, allowing myself to cry without apology, weep, be, a total blubbering mess, which I was for like the first 3 months of this year after my breakup. It's like allowing the body to discharge whatever crystallized energy is here, allowing the body to discharge this energy without resistance and without judgment. This is key. So we can do this through movement. We can do this just through the allowing of the emotions to flow. And I've even found that allowing ourselves to feel and express our emotions is a journey. So we need to get curious about what allows me to feel safe enough to feel my emotions fully. Is it that I need to be held by someone? Is it that I need to hold myself? At one point on my journey, I needed to create almost like womb-like structures. I used to, in one of my previous accommodations, I used to create like a little, almost hobbit hole where I would pile on blankets and pillows, and I would really need to feel like I'm cocooned in a safe womb for me to feel safe enough to have a release. I use music a lot still. Songs really help inspire a sense of safety and emotional freedom within me. I've used many different modalities. I've worked for a long time with EFT, which is emotional freedom technique, as a tapping sort of modality. One of the things that I recently discovered earlier this year was myofascial release, which out of everything I've tried, and I've worked with plant medicine, I've worked with, yogic Buddhist streams for many years, in terms of releasing survival stress and sort of crystallized states of trauma within the system, I've not found a more easy, safe and effective modality than myofascial release, because ultimately this crystallized fear that we're speaking of, it's stored in the body. The nervous system is habituated to it. therefore the fascia and the body's kind of natural makeup is starting to conform to these states of rigidity and fear. So when we actually work with the body and the body's natural intelligence, because the body knows how to discharge this energy, we just need to allow it. So when we actually work with this intelligence, the body starts to naturally discharge this survival stress. And myofascial release is a very passive modality because the practitioner is working with the body's natural capacities for somatic release to feel, to feel where the fascia doesn't feel free, to feel where the body is in some states of restriction or rigidity, and just starts to gently manipulate the body to support these releases. And I had just the most profound release earlier this year through a myofascial release. So for anyone interested, I really, really recommend looking into this modality. I thought it was really life-changing. So we've, once we've kind of addressed, and we continue to address, because this is an ongoing process, once we continue to address the body and tending to the body and really making the body a priority and seeing it as a temple and saying, how can I tend to you? How can I support you to open, to unfurl, to release rigidity, to release fear, to release contraction? And this has to be a focus. If we are to awaken new earth consciousness, this has to be a focus. Our inner attitude has to be one of compassion, loving awareness, holding, validating of the system and whatever we're feeling. It can't be one of judgment and denial, because this is just reinforcing separation. So we really have to open to, almost become like the divine parent for our body consciousness and for our inner child and these parts that have been frozen or crystallized in fear. And once we start unfurling from these states of contraction and rigidity, control, lack of trust, what naturally starts to come online is this sort of beautiful unfurling of joy and creation and freedom and a kind of spontaneous marriage with the now, where we access all possibilities and potentials, we access the soul's innate wisdom, we access higher guidance, and we start to feel ourselves as part of this current of creation and this flow that I've been speaking about. And my journey and my work, I feel at its core, is all about this. It's about supporting people to reawaken to this joy within them. Love, of course, is central to the New Earth architecture, but actually I feel that joy, pleasure, and play are really, really fundamental to not just the New Earth, but really for the soul to feel truly fulfilled. My direct experience of the soul is that it is a joyous consciousness. It is a joyous state to vibrate with the soul. And this was actually reinforced for me earlier this year when I went on a pilgrimage to the south of France, and I was called to various sites in the south of France, which are regarded as very highly spiritual sites, which are said to have been inhabited by, or at least frequently visited by Mary Magdalene after Yeshua's crucifixion and death. This is something I could create a whole podcast episode on. But I was called, because as a rose priestess, I was called to this sacred site in the south of France, they call it Mary Magdalene's Cave in Saint-Bon. I was called there and had been called there for many years. I kept delaying the journey, and I finally surrendered and made this journey there. And I was actually surprised by the guidance I received from the Divine Mother when I was there, because almost immediately upon landing, I was not so far from the cathedral where it's said Mary Magdalene's skull is housed, and I visited that cathedral, and I did visit the skull, and there was definitely a holy vibration and emanation in that chamber, not necessarily in the whole sort of building itself, but that chamber, there was definitely a holy emanation there. But what really came as I was sort of landing in this space was the Divine Mother in the form of the goddess Sophia, which within the Gnostic tradition particularly is considered the feminine Christ energy, the feminine Christed principle. The goddess Sophia was saying to me throughout my time on this land, I need you to sing and I need you to dance and I want you to allow yourself to be in states of rapture and joy. That's what this land needs. That's how you can venerate and celebrate the divine feminine. That is how you can support the resurrection of the feminine Christed principle on earth. It's through your embodiment of joy. So I was told, please go and sing outside of the church where there's so much sort of Christian, dogmatic, highly rigid, religious energy, really constricting the flow of the divine feminine there, really restricting and constricting the true emanation of Mary Magdalene and who she was, and her profound part as part of the union with Yeshua, had the profound part she played in humanity's unfolding. There's just such a degradation of the feminine. And so the instruction I received at a heart level was, please go and sing outside the church, reawaken the flow of Shakti here, reawaken the flow of the feminine, because when we sing, when we dance, we are honoring the flow of creation, we're honoring the goddess, we're honoring the feminine principle. So I sang soul songs outside of the church. I danced when I went to walk to the cave. There's a hostel at the base of that mountain, which is run by a Christian Brotherhood. It's a there is a peaceful emanation there, but within the context of why that site is sacred, it feels like such a prison for the feminine consciousness. It's just very austere. It's very, it's very much kind of old school religion in its approach. It's just sort of bare walls. The institution is bare walls. It's masculine led. The Mary Magdalene is considered a saint, but she's not venerated to the standard or the degree to which she deserves. There's no true honoring of her genuine embodiment and who she really was. It's a diminished veneration of the feminine principle, which of course is echoed throughout most religious systems, monotheistic religious systems at least. And so when I was in that hostel, this sort of austere, oppressive frequency there, I just couldn't stand it. The whole time I was in the bedroom there, I was dancing and I was singing and I was really allowing Shakti to flow, and that was the directive. And during my time on that retreat, and well, it was a self-led retreat, that pilgrimage, it was absolutely crystal clear to me that the goddess was speaking through me and to me, saying, your work here on earth, given that you are a conduit of Shakti, Kundalini is awake within you. You really are starting to understand the flow of creation. Reawaken joy, creation, embodied soul freedom within as many people as you can. Support them to awaken this consciousness. This is so important for our collective remembrance, because our spiritual path is not designed to be an austere one. It doesn't need to be one of where we deprive the fullness of who we are. To me, a true spiritual path is one where we embrace the fullness of our being. We embrace the fullness of expression. We allow for the flow of creation through us. We don't inhibit. We don't deny. We don't shut down or shame. We have to be mindful, of not identifying with any one expression to the degree that we form a really sort of crystallized ego out of that, and an identity structure that limits consciousness. But we allow whatever is here to be here without judgment in this flow of creation when it's coming from this flow of creation. And so there is really this feeling within me that the renewal of joy, pleasure, and play is absolutely paramount, not only for the new earth, but for the resurrection of the feminine principle within us. Because if you actually feel into the goddess, the divine mother, the feminine, and we need not look any further than our beautiful home of the earth to see this embodied. The mother is bountiful. I'm in Bali right now. The mother is bountiful. She is abundant. She is overflowing with eros and sensuality. She is so naturally creative. There are innumerable expressions, innumerable forms. She is so fertile. When we truly embrace the mother principle, there is no lack, there is no scarcity. When we really start to reestablish the goddess within us and on the earth, there is no lack, doesn't exist, because she is innately abundant. She is innately creative. And this is such a joyous thing to behold and to embody. And so it really feels like my work and my path is to support this reclamation, as much for my own soul as for those that I interact with and support, because I absolutely know what it's like. I was a very sort of joyous child. I remember having this connection to a very solar energy as a child. Like, I'm a Leo sun, I've got a stellium in Leo, but I'm a Leo sun, and I naturally have this very solar energy about me. I was very joyous. I was very, very fully expressed, very creative. I remember smiling so much as a very young child. I just remember feeling the magic of life. And as with all of us, to varying degrees, that joy started to become diminished. That spark within me started to dampen through a series of very, very difficult circumstances during my early childhood. And that soul flame started to become very, very withered. It started to become extinguished through my experiences. And then by the time I was a teenager and I was preparing to go to university, I was already in a lot of dissociation. I was drinking heavily. I was starting to sort of, you could say, go off the rails. I was rebelling. And that was a necessary part of my evolutionary process. It was me sort of trying to break down the good girl structure that I'd become very well habituated in. But by the time I got to uni, I was suicidal. I was heavily depressed. And I would then spend the next decade of my life both in those states and starting to recover from those states and the PTSD that seeded those states. So, I know directly what it's like to be experiencing the opposite of joy, to feel completely empty, to feel as though you have no worth, no meaning, as though life is completely devoid of anything worth living for. And I know that this is a fallacy that is born out of these crystallized states of fear that obstruct the truth. And so when we really work with these parts that feel, outside of the embrace of love, that feel crystallized in fear, that feel alone, separate, severed, when we work with these parts of ourselves and of reality, we start to bring God consciousness back into these parts, and we start to thaw them so that they can actually reintegrate. And it really feels, for me, that every major challenge we experience, we could call it the chironic wound in astrology, the place where we really have like a really gaping wound within us. When we work consciously to alchemize this, it becomes our greatest medicine for the world. So I believe I can only really support people to awaken to this consciousness as I integrate it and as I teach on it. I can only really support this process because I've known the journey so intimately myself. I've known what it's like to live in poverty. I've known what it's like to live amongst and amidst abuse. I know what it's like to be homeless. I was homeless at 3 as a child. I know what it's like to be a child of divorce, and I know what it's like to live around unstable parents. My father has a lot of sort of mental and spiritual issues, and I know what it's like to feel a lack of belonging. I know at an earthly level so many of these challenges, and I think that those of us that are truly here to be leaders and guides of the new earth, we teach from a space of embodiment, which means that we are directly schooled. We are directly schooled through our own experience on the path, so that we're teaching from a place of sincerity and not just theoretical understanding and knowledge. That's the old paradigm. The new earth is based on embodiment. It's based on direct experience. It's based on a marriage with the truth, not just intellectual knowledge and academic truth, which is limited because it comes from the mind. And so I felt it. I've lived it myself. I know what it's like to be in the depths of hell. I've crawled 1,000 times through the depths of hell, and I have now seen and live at least for times on a daily basis, in states of heaven consciousness, joy consciousness, creation consciousness, and I see that this is accessible and possible for all beings. I do not believe there are any exceptions to this, but we have to be willing to do the work. We have to be willing to dive deep. We have to be willing to feel what's here. We have to be willing to take accountability, and not everyone will be ready for that. But I suspect if you're tuning into this podcast and you're tuning into my work, you are ready for that, and you're no doubt a leader of that in some way, shape, or form. So one of the last things I want to touch on here before we wrap up this episode, which I feel I could speak on indefinitely, but I really want to try and keep these episodes to around 50 minutes or less. One of the last things I want to speak on here is money and wealth consciousness, because I've been really moving through a deconditioning around money for a long time, many, many years. I feel I've come at my poverty consciousness from almost every possible route imaginable. And again, because I've directly experienced both financial poverty as well as, just the kind of poverty consciousness that seeds a sense of deficit in many different ways in our lives, because I've known this so intimately, I grew up in it, and I've still been playing it out, especially since my spiritual awakening. It's been so destabilizing that I've been living in a lot of financial hardship and poverty, because I need to see the program. And so life is reflecting it to me through this sense of deficit. And so I've been working with this for many years. And this year particularly, I invested in a really wonderful academy which supported me to do a lot of shadow work around money and healing around money. And one of the things that's really become apparent to me as I've been doing this deeper work and also working with the feminine principle and the goddess is that I'm starting to see that money in its highest expression is, we could call it a lubricant of creation. It's almost like a magic carpet that allows us to move through this plane in a highly creative way. What is money? It's an exchange of value. So it allows us to say, I value this thing and I'm going to invest in this thing through this exchange of value. So it's just how we, in its most predominant form, which is, currency, this is how we exchange value on earth right now. Maybe we'll evolve into a different exchange of value, but right now, this is where we are. It is the primary exchange of value. And so what I've found in my work is that if we want to access money, and we need money on earth to build, to create, to lubricate creation, because almost everything we need on earth requires us to invest in it financially. If we are to work with money from New Earth consciousness, we actually need to be vibrating in alignment with the New Earth consciousness in relation to money. So what I've received from the money goddess, because I experience the flow of money and the stream of money, the field of money, as a very kind of feminine energy, as a flowing principle. It's a very watery energy to me. And when I tuned into the money goddess, what she said to me was, I vibrate with joy. I vibrate and I direct towards those who experience joy when they interact with me. I vibrate with joy. It's a very light, sort of like buoyant energy, and it's very creative. It amplifies, wherever you put your money, you're amplifying something, you're amplifying the value of something. And so money is very sort of, for me, it's a very buoyant, almost fairy-like energy. And the money goddess was saying, if you're trying to interact with me, this kind of joyous stream of creation that helps creation and amplifies creation and has a consciousness of its own, if you're trying to interact with me from fear and scarcity and lack and control and judgment, do you think that we're a vibratory match? No. So you're going to continue to interact with the lower expression of me. And that is one of control and scarcity and fear. But the highest expression of money is one that is innately creative and here to support us to create on earth. It's just another energetic stream, which is part of the all. It's part of God consciousness. It's another expression of God consciousness that is designed to support us to create on earth. It's a medium through which we exchange value and we allow ourselves to create. And so we can only access money from New Earth consciousness or in New Earth consciousness when we're vibrating in alignment with it, which is, a vibration of joy and freedom and overflow and a recognition of how expansive it is to create on earth. And so I'd like to kind of almost leave you with maybe an inquiry. This is something that came through for me a few days ago with regards to how we can come back to this new earth consciousness, to this current of creation consciousness, how we can start to really at a day-to-day, moment-to-moment level establish ourselves in the flow of creation and move out of these crystallized states of fear. What came through for me, because I'm heading to Australia on Saturday, I've just booked my flight, but money is still not something that is really abundant in my experience. I'm constantly learning on this trip that when I trust, when I allow the soul to lead, the next breadcrumb presents itself, the next step presents itself, not 10 steps ahead, but the next viable aligned step presents itself when I'm in trust. When I'm in doubt, my experience feels very, very foggy and nebulous and difficult and challenging. When I allow myself to sink into the current, what I need is provided for me in very unexpected ways. So I recently received a donation of £200 just after I'd said a prayer to the divine to say, I am open to, because I know I'm here to go to Australia. My soul is calling me there. There's a lot within the land that my soul wants me to commune with and awaken to. I know I'm being called there, and I'm open to receiving the most aligned way of getting there. I don't know how it's going to happen yet financially. And I received a donation of £200, which has secured my over. And so, there was this feeling when I was wondering about or this kind of like almost inner inquiry when I was wondering about how will I get to Australia, because financially I don't have the means at the moment, and I'm still oscillating between trust and fear. It's like my system's just playing out this program and really seeing all the ways in which I'm still in some way attached to this program of scarcity. And I heard inwardly, you're asking the wrong question. It's not how can I make more money. It's not how can I get the 400, 600 pounds I need to get to Australia and to get to my friends in Australia. You're asking the wrong question. The question is, what do I need to do in order to be in alignment with my soul in this moment? And if I recognize that my soul vibrates as joy, as bliss, as expansion, as creation, as love, what do I need to do in order to be in alignment with that? How do I wish to express in order to be in alignment with that? What would feel joyous for me to experience in this now moment? Do you see the difference in the inquiry from what do I need to do to get more money? It's fear-based, it's scarcity-based, it's lack-based, it's doubt-based, and reframing to how do I, and it's also, by the way, 3D based, as in I'm focused on the money as the external object. I'm focused on obtaining something at a physical level. When the new earth consciousness is an inner state, I'm looking to cultivate an inner state first, and that inner state is the cultivation of the soul. So how can I nourish my soul in this moment and trust that when I'm in alignment with the soul, I will be supported on my soul's path, and trust that flow, that the money, the support, whatever's needed will come when I'm in alignment with that. So that's my new normal. That's my set point. That's the cultivation of an inner state, right? It's not the focus on the thing. It's not the focus on the what. It's a focus on the how. It's a focus on the consciousness from which I'm living my life. And so I invite you to just sort of apply this reframe to your own experience anytime you notice you're in fear, doubt, scarcity, struggle. Just remember, if you're asking, what do I need to do to get the thing, to make the change, to obtain something physically, you're asking the wrong question. The question always needs to be, within the new earth architecture, how can I cultivate and support the cultivation of my soul's embodiment, my soul's freedom, my soul's joy, my soul's creative, naturally dynamic, naturally multidimensional, naturally abundant nature more? How can I honor the truth of my being in this moment? And trusting that when we do this, we are in alignment with the current of creation. We are awakening to the abundant nature of the divine, of God, Goddess, and that we will be supported from this space, because God, Goddess is abundant, is omnipresent, omnipotent, all-powerful, all-knowing, is infused in all things, and we just need to awaken to that. It's not that there's ever been lack or scarcity, it's that we've been unconscious to the true nature and abundance of God. And with that, let's bring the episode to a close. I think I'm roughly on time. It's been an absolute joy and a pleasure to be here with you, and I'm really glad that I finally moved on this episode, because it's been really joyous to actually share this stream of creation that's been really moving through me and that I've been assimilating. And I just want to mention here before we close that if you are resonating with my work and you feel a call to work with me, if you really feel, particularly the contents of this episode, it really has awakened something within you, my in-person immersion Freedom, the retreat experience, is now live to the public and is happening from May 11th to May 17th of 2016. Sorry, 2026. 2026. So next year in the south of France, inspired by the Crested Rose Codes, inspired by the Path of Union, inspired by the goddess Sophia's directive to me to continue to cultivate joy and a sense of freedom and really allow the creative energies and feminine energies within us to flourish. This retreat has been designed as a joyous reclamation of these energies. And so we're going to be working with the mediums of sound, movement, writing, art, a little bit of theatre, embodied play, archetypal play, really beautiful, deep paired work, group connection work, individual work, in a luxurious environment, in an environment that's going to actually support the cultivation of body safety, and just really that kind of luxuriating sense of overflow and abundance. This creation has been entirely free of my agenda or will. This has come as a direct sort of creation to me, knocked on my heart's door and said, hello, I'd like you to create this, please. And I've just been the conduit to deliver it. So there is an intelligence behind creation when we allow it to flow through us that is perhaps even beyond our human understanding or understanding. It's just for us to either accept or not accept, but if we're in alignment with the new earth, we accept the creation that wants to flow through us and we deliver it to the best of our abilities without an agenda. We allow the innocence of the heart to lead, and that innocence of the heart is just that alignment with truth, alignment with what the heart wishes to express. So if you do feel called to work with me and to come on this experience with me, all the details you need will be on my website, or if you're watching on YouTube, in the description box below, you can find those links. It is going to be a joyous reclamation. The frequency feels so solar, so expansive, just such a sensual revival, such a creatively expansive and dynamic experience. It's going to be an intimate group. So I really invite you, if you're feeling the call, if you're ready to invest in yourself and ready to invest in New Earth consciousness, ready to invest in the liberation of your feminine principle in a way that isn't heavy, isn't arduous, isn't shadow work based. Of course, there are going to be these elements that arise, but is focused on cultivating and really amplifying New Earth energy, New Earth joyous, creative energies within yourself, and really allow yourself to immerse yourself in play and pleasure. You're going to really love this experience. So all the details you need are on my website or in the description box if you're on YouTube. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be here with you. And I look forward to seeing you again in our subsequent episodes, where I am really excited to be in connection with some wonderful souls who we're going to have some really great conversational chambers with. So until those episodes, until next time, sending much love and heaps of blessings to everyone listening. May we seed the new earth together. May we have the courage to follow the call of the soul in all we do. May the light and love of the divine prevail. Namaste, friends.